to Healthy TV, episode number 31, and on today's show, I'm continuing the series on why we gain weight, and we're talking about genes and what do your genetics have to do with weight gain. This is a really interesting topic and one that I'll admit I only really scratched the surface prior to the last month or so, and so I'm really excited to dive into some of the details of this because there's a lot to uncover. I'll put it that way. Now, I will say just at the outset that this is a really complicated topic, and so I will be really just covering some key points. And so if any of you have some further questions, which I imagine some of you will, just put them in the comments below, and I'll be happy to, I'm certainly no expert, but I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. So in this series, this is actually the third part of this series. Part one, we actually dove into what's the actual root of this, I think this myth that, weight gain comes from just a lack of willpower. And so I actually talked about the actual evolutionary history of eating and motivations to eat. And so, yeah, check back to that episode because I think that's really interesting. It sets the groundwork for the following one, which was all about calories and this concept of, good calories and bad calories and what we should really think about calories. So that's episode 30, and then like I said, today we're talking about genes. So, I think the first thing I wanted to clarify, and there's certainly no I guess judgment on anyone who maybe holds this belief, but it's really, I think, common based on our education. Like I remember when I was back in high school, and you learn that, okay, your genes dictate your outcomes. This is kind of basic like that, right? Like if your parents have a certain set of behaviors and characteristics, in particular around health, if you have certain health characteristics, then as offspring or kids, you're just going to have the same thing, right? The same problem. So as a more explicit example, like if your mom had breast cancer, then you're going to get breast cancer. If your dad had heart disease, then you're going to get heart disease. And so that concept is called determination and genetic determinism. And that's actually largely been dispelled. That's like a myth. There's such thing as disposition, and so there are certain genes that can be really can lead you to having a higher likelihood or a higher risk of developing certain health problems, but it's not determined. It's not something that's preset when you're born. So that's a really important distinction to make, is the difference between determination and disposition. I think if we go a step further from there, we often think when we hear genes being related to certain health problems, I think that we often consider genes in the same way that or the way that genes work in the body. We think about them the same way as we do about say eye color or hair color or skin tone, right? Those things are determined, right? I've got blue eyes. That's set by certain genes, and those genes actually determined that I was going to have blue eyes. Right? There's no other impact. There's no choices I could make to change the outcome of my eyes being blue. Okay, that is a true genetic determination. The things like weight gain and any kind of really chronic health problem, those things don't act in the same way. In fact, what happens is that we have this distinction now between genetics, the study of genetics, and then also the study of epigenetics. And so that's really where this conversation around how genes relate to weight gain actually fits into this conversation about epigenetics. And so what epigenetics means is that you have a certain set of potential genes to be switched on and off. And we all have a unique set of these genes. And it really comes down to the way that basically the choices that you make that create the internal environment for your body, and that internal environment will actually switch on or off certain genes. And as it relates to weight gain in particular, there's a whole host of genes that are linked to, say, obesity. Okay, similarly to diabetes. So yes, there's certain individuals who are more predisposed to developing those conditions. But guess what? It's likely because of the choices that their parents made, and now we see that it's also their grandparents, choices that they made changes their epigenetics, right? So that they switch genes on in their bodies, and as they procreate, as they have babies, those genetic switches are more obvious. Okay, they're more easily turned on and off. So that really comes down to, like, yes, it's true if you're born with, unfortunately, with maybe a set, and we would say like an epigenetic profile that is predisposes you to weight gain. Okay, that's unfortunate, but it doesn't mean that you're going to gain weight. You might gain weight more easily than like a counterpart, a friend, or someone who doesn't share the same genes. But it requires creating the environment that's going to switch those genes on. So really the key point here is that, yes, if you make the same choices that your parents made, then and they were obese or they were overweight, then yeah, it's likely that you're going to be overweight. Okay? But you can make different choices. And in fact, this is where I think the real empowering side of this whole story of epigenetics comes into, is that it's up to you, right? You have control of what choices you make, which can either turn on or not turn on those genes. And so when it comes to what those choices look like, really that's a conversation for another day. And we're going to talk about the solution on next week's episode. Okay, but if you want to get a head start, I've put a link to the Eat by Design Quick Start Guide, and if you download that, it's just a couple of pages, a little article, and there's 5 steps that we go through in there. And if you start to put in practice those 5 steps, you're going to set yourself up for certainly set yourself up for success. It's not going to solve all of your problems for sure, but it's going to create a really good foundation for maybe some more specific steps to be taken in the future. Okay. So I hope that helps. It's a big topic. Please put your questions, comments below, and I'll be happy to follow up, because this is a really interesting topic for me. And so, yeah, until next week, have a great weekend.